Innovators are responsible for the technological developments in the past few centuries, starting from the Enlightenment period. The ideas that innovators use are sometimes theirs and other times borrowed. His journey as an innovator in the automobile industry begins at Edison Illuminating Company. Join us in this Liber-Tea episode as we revisit the life and times of one of America's leading industrialists, Henry Ford. While Henry worked in the Edison Illuminating Company as an engineer, he developed the world's first horseless gasoline-powered carriage, the Quadricycle. This fantastic work was conducted behind his house. In 1903, Henry Ford incorporated the Ford Motor Company, and within 5 years, he introduced the legendary Model T to the automobile market. The automobile was a hit. Demand for this automobile caused Henry Ford to develop revolutionary methods for mass production to meet market demand. Ford's revolutionary mass production techniques included the production of standard, interchangeable parts, and later, in 1913, his company began the first automobile assembly line. The improvements conducted on the assembly line by Ford enabled effective production of automobiles starting with Model T. The moving production line allowed Ford workers to assemble a Model T automobile in under a minute. Ford's sphere of influence extended beyond the automobile industry. He was very vocal in politics. Over the years, Henry Ford had received criticism for his anti-Semitic writings and views. Because of his political controversies, Ford lost a Senate bid in 1918. Henry Ford made public announcements about his admiration of Germany and Adolf Hitler in his anti-Semitic writings called the International Jew. In 1938, the Grand Cross of the German Eagle was awarded to Henry Ford by the Nazi government. Henry Ford was born in 1863 to Mary and William Ford. The couple ran a successful farm in Michigan. As a teenager, Ford left home for Detroit, where he began working as an apprentice for a machinist. Later, he returned to the farm, where he continued to service and operate steam engines. Occasionally, he would work in factories around Detroit. When he finally returned to Detroit as an engineer in the Edison Illuminating Company, Ford advanced rapidly in his career to become the firm's chief engineer. This is also the time he developed the Quadricycle at home. To establish his company, Ford sold the Quadricycle. This also enabled him to raise funds to improve the model further. Luckily, many investors were looking to work with him, forming the Detroit Motor Company, later named the Henry Ford Motor Company. However, the company's investors became frustrated with his constant need to improve the prototype. This caused him to abandon the company to establish his own company. After his departure, the company became known as the Cadillac Motor Company. A year after leaving the company, Ford incorporated the Ford Motor Company. Shortly after its incorporation, Model A was unleashed. During this period, automobile companies could only produce a few cars per day, as 2 or 3 people were working on them, and most parts were procured from other firms. Ford was determined to remedy this problem and create an automobile that was efficient and affordable to everyone. This desire was manifested in Model T, which was introduced to the market in 1908. By 1927, company had sold over 15 million Model T vehicles across the U.S. Additionally, the company used the profits to expand across the world. Model T, also known as Tin Lizzie, was cheap, reliable, and easy to maintain. The automobile was revolutionized in 1913 by the introduction of the moving assembly line. The moving assembly line enabled Ford engineers to produce a new Model T within 90 minutes. Despite the success of the assembly line, most workers hated it as it made work monotonous. Many workers went to work for the company's competitors. The moving assembly line resulted in a high turnover, causing the company to introduce the $5 day. At this period, this amount was double what a worker would be paid per day. Additionally, the shift length was reduced to 8 hours. By 1926, Ford workers worked for only 5 days. These drastic changes in the firm's company culture caused serious changes in the competitive labor market. It also helped the company enhance its employee retention by making the vehicles cheaper for its employees. Ford's company demonstrates one of his most remarkable talents, his ability to identify and attract supremely talented individuals. He engaged a core of able young men who shared in his vision and later transformed the Ford Motor Company into one of the greatest companies in the world. From Model A, which did not do well as expected, Ford and his team of talented engineers worked relentlessly to make critical improvements on subsequent versions. Through his contributions to the automobile industry, Henry Ford laid a firm foundation for the 20th century. His adaptation of the moving assembly line became the hallmark of 20th century production mode, which was eventually applied to everything. The vast materials utilized by the Allied forces during World War II were produced quickly, cheaply, and efficiently thanks to the moving assembly line. Additionally, Ford's high wages for his workers enhanced migrations from America's rural areas to cities. It also ignited mass migrations from overseas to the U.S. The high wages paid to factory workers significantly accelerated them to the rapidly expanding middle class, thanks to Ford's $5-day revolution. True to the law of unintended consequences, huge numbers of low-skilled laborers created the industrial unionism of the 1930s, which would later become one of America's most potent political and social forces. Henry Ford is a man who got inspiration from the past, saw endless opportunities of the future, and believed that the human experience could be more fulfilling through technology. For Henry Ford, technology was not a means to rip profits, but rather a channel for harnessing the power of technology. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you have enjoyed and learned something new. Like, share, and subscribe to Liber-Tea for more.